My name is Amanda Ring, and this is Flight of the Feminine. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark. To awaken your womb and heart consciousness, I'm inviting you to open to the realms of energy and spirit, to evoke empowerment and create sovereignty. As a sacred soul, each one of you are on this journey through life. Welcome back to Flight of the Feminine. I'm Amanda Ring, your host. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark, womb and heart consciousness, the realms of energy and spiritual expansion, empowerment and sovereignty. As a sacred soul, each one of you are on this journey through life. Today, we are going to wade into the waters of worthiness. Such a layered topic, and I'm sure in time there will be more than one episode on this theme. Worthiness is a topic that every woman, and in truth, every human, whether they're aware of it or not, encounters on the daily. You can press pause and grab a journal or paper and a pen to have on hand for when you might want to join in on the self-inquiry pieces that I take you through a little bit later in the episode. I'm actually going to give you some questions that you can fully explore off episode. Otherwise, we'd be waiting for hours because it can be so juicy and you'll want to have time to dive in to those questions properly. Or if you're listening right now while you're driving or doing something else, you just mark where the journaling parts are in the episode and you can come back to them later. So let's get into it, shall we? I remember when I first started offering women's work in the form of confidence and self-esteem exploration. And man, that was early in my rebirth process and sort of birthing my work differently in the world. And that was back around 2016, 2017. I created a one-day workshop called Creating Confidence, a retreat day for women. And it evolved out of the one-to-one work I had been doing with women in my private practice and the common themes that cropped up with practically every one of my clients, and safe to say, every single one. It's also how my Wise Women's Circles started to get created as well. I not only knew that women needed to explore more deeply within themselves the concepts and themes of confidence and esteem and worth, but they also needed to connect with other women around these same core issues that left many of them, most of them, feeling alone in their struggles. And this is why it's so key to gather in events and workshops and online courses or circles or trainings. This connection with one another is so key to our healing and our growth. And we talked about this quite a bit in episode 8 with Dr. Karen Ward, women gathering together and why it's so important. If you haven't had a listen to that one, go and pour a cup of tea and check that one out. These connections with other women helps to provide the evidence that what you're feeling and thinking is not only common among other women, but often the realization is it's also a big set of lies, really and truly. Worthiness, or a perceived lack thereof, is candy for the shame imprinting that we have and the harmful aspects of the ego that wants you to fall prey to its temptation and drink the Kool-Aid. One of the first things we explored in these workshops was the difference between confidence and self-esteem. Self-esteem is intricately connected to your sense of worthiness. They are almost synonymous and interchangeable. Once again, as in other episodes, I'm going to get into the etymology or the root meanings of these words and highlight how important they are and how important your language is by understanding that they hold this not only intellectual definition, but they hold an energetic imprinting. Your words are powerful. My kids, who are now teenagers, can often get a little fed up with me sometimes as I gently and consistently remind them to watch what they are saying, how they're saying it about themselves, about the world, about their friends, about family members. Folks, we truly spell our beliefs and our perceptions into reality by speaking them and thinking about them. Spoken word and written language are both symbols that are creating almost like a geometry in and of themselves. And the sounds of them hold a vibrational frequency. Make no mistake, our words that create our thoughts and our beliefs are powerful. And as an aside to that, if you haven't listened to episode 2, Thoughts Become Things, check that one out to explore it a little bit more with me and Dr. Emoto's work, which is also referenced in the show notes of that episode. Before we go to self-esteem, let's just talk about esteem. The definition for esteem is to regard highly or favorably, to regard with respect or admiration. So in the noun sense, it's worth or reputation. But in more of a verb, it's to appraise, to compare with an estimate. And those come from Old French and Old Latin and Middle English. When we use it in a more figurative sense, esteem is to assess the merit of something or someone. And all of those definitions come from around the 16th century. So when we look at self-esteem, in Old English, it's described as to esteem, to honor, to worship, to distinguish, to celebrate, to exalt, to praise, to reward. And in the Proto-Germanic etymology, it's to estimate or appreciate or appraise. So again, this sense of merit. So our self-esteem is how we perceive our own value. It's based on our own opinion and belief about ourselves, what our own value is. So when we think about worth and worthiness, it's very, very similar to self-esteem. They can be used interchangeably. Self-worth and self-esteem is the value you have and hold of yourself, not what society holds or thinks of you, but your own self-worth. Confidence is different. Confidence is defined more as a state of feeling certain about the truth of something, or a feeling or belief that you can rely on someone or something. There's a firmness to it. There's a trust inherent in it. Confidence has an element of conviction, assuredness, and trust. Quite different from self-esteem. And self-confidence is your belief in your capacity, right? A trust in yourself, an assuredness that you can learn new things, that you can actuate change, that you can execute tasks or activities. There's a feeling of self-assurance that arises from the appreciation of your own abilities or your own qualities. And so I remember when we were exploring this in that workshop that many years ago, and each time that we explored it, it was eye-opening for women and how they had perceived themselves, and how they had sort of mixed up these ideas about self-confidence and self-esteem and self-worth. When it comes to falling into worthiness traps, it's really important to know the difference between confidence and esteem or worth. It is a very real experience for many women, for people in general, to feel confident in various aspects of their lives, very competent and successful in a manner of ways. And success is a whole other topic of how that gets defined, but we often say in our Western culture that this person carries themselves with confidence. That's a common sort of thought, or, oh, that person seems very confident, or they're very confident in themselves. So we can have a very real experience of observing that in someone or feeling it in ourselves. And at the same time, their self-worth or yours could still be actually in your boots. So self-confidence and self-worth do not go hand in hand all the time in terms of the level in which you experience them. You can be very confident and lack self-worth. And we can see many cases of this with people of fame and fortune who appear very confident in their trade of life and their way that they show up, in whether they're a movie star or they're a renowned CEO of a company or they're a well-known healer. They could have a lot of popularity and they may have amassed a lot of wealth, and yet they end up in very destructive relationships or have very destructive habits that end up sabotaging their happiness and sometimes even their abundance. And this really, 9 times out of 10, is connected to a core wounding around how much they actually value themselves, how much worth they feel they actually behold. Even when others value them dearly and greatly, if they do not have that internal sense of worthiness, it won't matter. And once again, this is the patriarchal paradigm at its insidious work through our psyches and our society. The patriarchal paradigm has benefited greatly by people feeling trapped in a state of unworthiness, because it perpetuates the capitalist machine of owning, gaining, achieving, and striving for more and more and more. Why? To prove one's value. I always have to take a big breath when I think about that because it's so misaligned to our true nature. The patriarchal and capitalist machine doesn't encourage a belief in your innate value, because then it can keep selling you the idea that you must do and demonstrate your moreness to be worthy of your happiness, your financial stability, of liking or loving yourself, of approving of your own choices and beliefs. There are so many ways to fall into worthiness traps that have been purposely set by our sociocultural paradigm at work. Particularly, I speak of the Western culture because that's where I am obviously rooted. However, the feminine and the matriarchal principles within a sociocultural paradigm actually acknowledges and values difference and uniqueness in a very different way. It recognizes the need for uniqueness, variety, and difference in order for us to co-create and support the whole of humanity in its variable nature, just like the earth. We need all different kinds of trees and plants and different qualities of storms that all contribute to this interconnected nature of vitality and resilience and abundance. What is a worthiness trap? I mean, I've generally spoken about it, but what is a worthiness trap? When I was thinking about the title for this episode, I was just thinking, well, just worthiness. And then I was like, no, this is really about worthiness traps and how we get caught in them. And it's really any time you externalize your worth and value, and then you get trapped in an inner cyclone of self-doubt, of self-minimization, and hold a perception of yourself as less than in some way. The result of this is often you then using and sending even more of your precious energy outward to prove your value to someone or something. Your perceptions of your worth, your inherent value, when are internalized, like anything else you internalize through your perceptions, become your beliefs. And you as a human operate from your perceptions and your beliefs. Perceptions are how you perceive reality. It's the lenses through which you see the world. Your beliefs are your accepted truths or the validity of something. So when you believe something, it's truth for you. But those beliefs are shaped by your perceptions. Now, fortunate for us, we can change our perceptions and beliefs. We actually have full control over changing those. And that's super important when we're talking about our self-worth and our self-value. Because your internal sense of personal worth and value gets shaped by what society has told you or shown you, what your family and peers have spoken about around you or acted upon themselves, and what religious or other cultural communities you might belong to or have belonged to have said or shared, because all of these have their own set of values and perceptions, and often are very polarized into right and wrong, good and bad, valuable, not valuable. Some core examples of what a lot of qualifiers for people are in society around what is valuable and deserves to be given merit or assessed as having worth are things like your education status, your employment status, your relationship status, financial status. For a lot of women, childbearing status, the status of your athleticism, your artistic, creative, or musical abilities or status, your beauty status or attractiveness. Now, all of those things, who are those most defined by? Who defines what value all of those have? Society. And our primary culture, aka your family and your peer groups. But who defines the value for them? Society that you live in and their families. So our family, our parental dynamics, and our lineage and ancestral aspects of this are very important to be aware of, because our wounding around worthiness and value is absolutely handed down through our childhood experiences from our parents and our ancestral and lineage wounding, that it comes through the family stories and the family belief systems. And for many in the Western culture that have been continuously exposed to this patriarchal way, which is compare and divide, you will see that showing up in yourself when you hear the family stories, or you witness things, or you share in the various beliefs that maybe your parents have had, or grandparents, or others in your family. And what I mean by that is there will be often stories of celebration or accolades of current family members or past family members, and they're being honored and revered in some way for some personality trait that they had or something that they achieved. And not for everyone, and not in every case, but often there can be an immediate comparison if there is an internalized sense of lack of worth, that that person is better or was better than you for some reason, and that you're not measuring up. And the patriarchy, and like I mentioned, the capitalist machine wants you to compare and separate yourself, because then you have something that you need to attain, which it will help you with, to fill the void or to add to yourself so that you are better now. There's also stories that get handed down that you might have overheard, may not even been shared directly with you, of shame or taboo, or something that happened that the family members are quite embarrassed by, or still harboring this weight of guilt around in the community. This is also a touchstone where, whether you're aware of it or not, it's been internalized in the subconscious, and there's a don't be like that, or there's a qualification of that adds to your own sense of self-worth or value, and you will either move towards it or move away from it, even if maybe it's something that you're naturally inclined to be curious about, or it's a natural personality trait that you might have. I call that whole umbrella of societal, family, and lineage unworthiness that could be there as borrowed unworthiness. So this is journal time. So if you're able to grab your journal or some paper and a pen or what have you, or maybe even just press record on your phone so you can capture these questions, or just write the time down so you can come back to them. I'm going to offer you a few questions to take away and really take some proper time to explore. As some of you might have instant things that just come pouring out when I give you these questions, and others of you might need to sit with these questions, and especially if self-inquiry or self-reflection in this way is new for you, and that's okay. Give yourself the space and time, because sometimes our brain just says, what the F? Like, I don't even know how to answer this. So give yourself some grace if this is new. And if this isn't new and these questions are familiar, well, see what part of the question isn't and make it your own, and create an offshoot from it, and maybe you'll discover something you didn't before. So, question number 1. What were you encouraged to do or become throughout childhood by others? And others could be anyone. Could have been a parent, a teacher, a neighbor, your minister in your church. Could have been the parent of one of your friends. So just take a moment to bullet down a bunch of notes of the things that and not even so much about whether you wanted to do them or not. Just what were you encouraged to do or become throughout childhood by others? There's 2 more parts to this question. The next part is, having done or not done those things or become those things, which ones on that list do you feel badly about or have a sense of shame or failure around? You're going to want to just put a little check mark or something beside those. And the third part of that question, how are you still trying to make up for those things? The ones that you feel badly about or feel a sense of shame or failure around. How are you still carrying those and still trying to make up for them? These are a little bit of open-ended questions on purpose. And self-reflection is that. It's meant to be open and not a yes-no. It's meant to lead you and open you, and each person will be different. When you get through to these ones that you might feel badly about or a sense of shame or failure around, just give yourself some compassion, because when we think about those things, it generally brings up the feeling of that embarrassment or guilt or shame. We feel that in the body, and this is shared in other episodes on Flight of the Feminine as well. So it's important to go back and listen to those if you haven't. The one, your body is talking to you, are you listening? So even if this was like from the time you were 5 and someone had really encouraged you to do something and you didn't have any interest in doing it, and you did it or you didn't do it, it could still be sitting with you on a subconscious level. You could still feel like you need to measure up to the request of that and trying to make up for it somewhere. So have some compassion if you're feeling a little ick in your body, and remind yourself, put a hand on your heart and remind yourself that it's not happening currently, that you're just remembering this. But we know the brain doesn't know the difference, and the nervous system registers it the same way. So that's important to remember. But that sense in the body that might be a little ick is also a sign for you that there is a drop in your self-value and worthiness. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a second. So that's the first sort of trio of questions. The next question I have for you to write down is, at this moment in time, as you are, at your current age, your gender, your sexual orientation, your relationship status, your employment status, all of it, as you are right now, on a scale of 10 to 1, 10 being a most precious, valuable human, and 1 being not valuable in the least, what's your number? So write that number down. Then go back and look at the qualifiers. So age, gender, sexual orientation, relationship status, childbearing status, employment status, financial status, like all of those things. and go back to that scale from 10 to 1. Evaluate each one of those things on the presence of them in your life. If it makes you 10, a most precious, valuable human in your estimation, or 1 makes you not valuable at all. Just see what comes up as you go through that exercise. And the next question I have for you is, when reflecting on all of that evaluation and the statuses and the value, well, says who? That's the question. Who says what your value is in relation to all of those things, all of those attributes or qualities that society says you are meant to have? And, we can get into how this lands differently for women, specifically around relationship to their bodies and beauty, because there's so much in the patriarchal and capitalist paradigm that drives those industries for women to stay young looking and stay in this size bracket and shape and all of that. So you might want to separate even some more of those things out, that you are starting to connect the dots around how you have perceived value or not. So then it says who. Explore where those numbers come from within your own psyche. And you'll know immediately if those evaluations feel good or not. And those will tell you if that's a limiting belief, a misaligned sense of worthiness. When you pay attention to your body and your breath, as you go through each of those, you will know. You will be able to tell right away. The body never lies. Just moving through those exercises will really help you see how you externalize your worth and how you fall into those traps, because when we compare and devalue ourselves based on something external, we have all this subconscious programming going on. The minute we do that, you start to feel a sense of instability and unsettledness in the core of your being. And that's a sign in and of itself that it's not true, because things that are divine truths, that are aligned with the truth of who you are as a soul and as a being, are expansive and creates a solid feeling through your being and your body, and your breath feels open. The body feels more relaxed. So always pay attention to that as you're doing these exercises, and you might go through it in a very intellectual way to start with, and then go back through the questions from listening to your body and observing your breath practice. So you can really bring all of those together. That's a beautiful union of the feminine and the masculine. The masculine wants us to use our intellect and our logic, and our feminine principle wants us to really connect with the wisdom of the body, and a big part of that is the breath. My last question, and it's not quite a rhetorical question, but it's a question for pondering, for leaning into, because you might not have felt like you've actually had the permission to do this. You might even have some resistance to it, and your brain might say, how is this even possible? Your ego might really be like, what? Like, how do I do that and not align my worth on all the things that I do and achieve and show and own, right? So the question is, what if you chose to claim your own worth and value? What if you just chose to claim it? What if you defined it? But even more beyond a personal definition of it, what if you just chose to claim it? You chose to claim your own worth, your own value. In order to do this, you need to explore the shadow side of where you have let others decide, direct, and or claim it for you. And that's why I gave you those questions to play with and explore. Really great to sit with a friend who's open to this kind of exploration and do them together and share. It's so valuable because it helps you with the creative process and feel supported. So really just contemplate, what if you chose to claim your own worth and value? And allow yourself to lean into how you've allowed that to be determined by others. What if you could hold value regardless of what you do or don't do, what you have or don't have, what you own or don't, what you are or are not, what you look like or do not look like? What if you can hold value regardless of any of that? And this is often when the brain says, what, but we have to have values and we have to qualify things, because then how do we know where we stand in relationship to somebody else or in comparison to someone else? And how do I decide what I like or not like? And your ego and the brain are going to want to run wild with that one. And I invite you just to observe that and come back to this from a heart space, from a spiritual space, from a feminine essence. Because the energy of that is very, very different. When you ask this question or you allow this contemplation from a place in your heart, or from a higher knowing, from your inner wise woman, from the essence of the feminine, it will be very, very different. And it will be presenting something more like, what if you were born of love, as a precious, unique expression of life itself? What if you were born with inherent value? This is what the inner wisdom, the higher wisdom, the divine wisdom will birth and evoke and expand through you when you contemplate these questions from the heart space, not from the mind, not from society, but from your innate knowing. Each and every one of you listening, and myself included, were born a helpless baby, filled with life force and unlimited potential. Even those who are born differently abled, and I've worked with many of them as an occupational therapist over the years, everyone has inherent value as an expression of life itself and all its myriad ways to manifest and present in human form. All of us bring the gift of evoking lessons, growth, beauty, and change within each other and ourselves in the human experience on earth and of the earth herself. And each and every life, body, and soul has a unique purpose that gets revealed as you begin the unfolding of your journey through life, this earth walk. And when you start to lean in with your heart and your inner knowing and go beyond all of the wounding, the stories that have been passed on through society, through cultural experiences, through the generations, you start to reveal a sense of worth and value that is already there and that is your right to claim. What would the world be and feel like? How would the world be different? How would it feel different if this was the common belief and perception chosen and held by the human collective? How does this feel for you? How does it land? As in other episodes, take it or leave it or take it. It's okay if it doesn't align for you. If it's something that softens your body and opens your heart and feels more expansive, then you might be more in tune and aligned with this way of perceiving your life and your purpose of being here on earth. And if so, remembering that you have a choice in your perceptions, a choice in your beliefs. You get to create them. You get to uncreate the ones that are already operating that you borrow and have borrowed. The same as this borrowed unworthiness doesn't belong to you. It's been learned. How would the world feel different if this was the common belief and perception chosen and held by the human collective? How might you start to create this shift within yourself, your family, and your communities? And you can journal some ways that you could start this process. If this whole invitation around opening to the idea that your worthiness is inherent, you were born with it, that it's the unworthiness is borrowed from so many different places in society and your lineage, and that you actually get to choose your beliefs and your perceptions and unlearn anything that doesn't feel supportive and loving. How might you start to create that shift? Very practical things. It could be reframing thoughts that you have that are supporting this shame or comparison that has happened. And you can take how you might start to shift this within yourself back to the previous questions around how you value things and how you value yourself. There truly is so much powerful work here to create a new, healthier paradigm shift when it comes to worthiness. And this can be done so beautifully in self-reflective and self-inquiry work, reframing things in one-to-one support work and group experiences. And one of the ways that we do this is in the Wise Woman Awakening course, which is a self-paced and self-guided course. If that's something you might be interested in, certainly check it out in the show notes. There'll be a link there. And there will be more on this topic in the future for sure. One way we'll be exploring this more is with my guest, Tara Brading, who is a women's educator and storyteller and songstress. And she's going to be with me in the next episode. Tara and I, in that episode, will continue to explore this concept of worthiness and unworthiness and lineage healing, as we're going to dive into the topic of internalized misogyny for women and exploring how to heal misogyny, particularly within the matrilineal line, so in the mother lines. Tara's work offers a lot of ancestral healing, and I've connected with her through that actually, and did some work with her a year or so ago on the maternal ancestral line. So I'm really excited to have her join us. So stay tuned for that one and rejoin us there. It's time, my sisters, to elevate your mind, expand your feminine heart, explore your inner wisdom. Let's soar together. Sending you all big, big love.
This is Story Studio Network.